will you please, let's not do this. There's no need to waste English lives needlessly.
I'm
They're
really
precious.
sorry. I'm really, really, really sorry. My camera has just stopped recording. Right, so just give us a little refresher. So you were saying, sorry, my problem here. I've had camera issues. You were saying the English have been sent the letter. Carry on.
She's basically begging them, let's not do this. Let's not needlessly waste French and English lives when we could go on pretty much crusade, and we could achieve so much if we were to work together. I mean, if France and Britain work together, I mean, we could have the Franco-British Empire a little early.
Yeah.
Now, and the English respond that they'd rather. They basically kill the messenger and threaten to burn her, which, I mean, no offense to the English, but that was a rather uncouth response.
Yeah.
And it's not very gentlemanly to threaten to burn a lady.
No.
Especially a lady, Jeanne d'Arc. And the sad thing is, I know a lot of people will answer, no, the French burnt Jeanne d'Arc, but it was the Burgundians, the Burgundians, who did it on behalf of the English.
Yes.
Essentially, the English-controlled Frenchmen did this, the traitors. And so, basically they go through with this threat. And now I tend to think, to a limited extent, it's a bit of a stain on the English honor. But on the other hand, like you look at Louis's invasion of England in the time of King John, or really the French abandonment of Quebec, those are stains on the French honor. So, tit for tat.
Yeah, indeed. I also like the fact that she presents herself as a general in this chapter, right towards the end, because she says, she gives them the ultimatum. She go back and say to Lord Talbot this from me: come out of your Bastille with your host, and I will come with mine. If I beat you, go in peace out of France. If you beat me, burn me according to your desire. And that is a classic. Like, you might expect that from your hero, but this is a heroine, young girl.
Yep.
But acting like
she's 31.
A great man of honor.
Yep. And she's saying, let's do this honorably. Let's do this the right way.
I love it. It's a good inclusion to this book. It's because it's only a short chapter. What are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 paragraphs, 8 paragraphs. And yet within it, what you're finding out is it's building the character of John.
And there's almost it's just, this short speech reminds me of a few of those from the Bible where Jesus gives these very short responses when he's asked big questions, or he basically challenges people. He's like, come out here and face me.
Yeah.
But they don't. Or when they do so very clumsily and slyly. So it's very much in that kind of mold, at least in terms of the post. Chapter 15 has the introduction of a character I really like, Catherine. Catherine d'Orléans, I believe the mayor's daughter. And now I'm going to actually say, Noël and Paladin obviously fall in love with her. But I'm going to say Louis de Comte doesn't. But now he says, oh, I fell in love with her and I cherish her memory still. But here's the thing. He says, oh, yes, I fell in love with her. But he doesn't, there's something off about his love, I find. And he doesn't elaborate. He doesn't, here's the thing. If anything, it might be a slight crush. But when you look at the volume here, which is all about Jeanne and how to his mind, his best days were spent with Jeanne, his best times were with her, and that when she died, something broke inside of him. I'd argue he's in love with Jeanne d'Arc. And that Louis de Comte is not a reliable narrator in the context of Catherine.
Well, he
And
also speaks of Catherine as almost as beautiful as Joan.
exactly. So what's interesting is the other men are like, oh, Catherine's way more beautiful. She's so radiant and whatnot. Whereas Louis says she's almost as beautiful as Jeanne. Well, that means you think Jeanne's more beautiful and you
Yeah.
want her favor far more. And even when he seeks the favor of Catherine, it's not in the same, like, he seeks her favor, but it is still Jeanne's approval he craves. Now, like, the the context and the way it's described, it's just like, if I was to describe it, like, in my previous relationships, I've occasionally had female friends or whatever, although I tend to avoid women when I'm in a relationship because best to avoid all temptation. But I just have that belief system. But hey, if others still hang out with their female friends or whatever, or male friends when they're in a relationship, more power to you. But the reality is that my desire to seek the approval of other women is in a different context than how I'd seek out the one I care about and constantly seek out her favor and her approval. With him, much as he's occasionally seeking out Catherine, he's still running everything almost. He's still kind of seeking out Jeanne in a way. Like, and I just find there's still a much greater tenderness for Jeanne. Because when Paladin, okay, well, later on, the thing is, Louis could have had a shot with Catherine in the epilogue, but he never sought it out. Well, why is that? He could have, like, I think that he did have a shot. He could have found her and married her, but he didn't have any interest in doing so deep down. Now, on the surface level, he might say, well, I really liked her. Well, yeah, but that's all it was, like. Jeanne was love. And because he worships Jeanne, well, I'm going to be honest, when a man is in love, he does worship the woman he's with. Same as when a woman is with a man she loves, she worships him. This is the nature of love, at least in my experience. I don't know if that's naive on my part, but you revere that individual almost above all others. You'd rather spend time with them. But it seems like he's still spending more time with Jeanne, still acting as her secretary and not finding excuses out of it. I know this might seem like a weird explanation.
No, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking it through because there's a few things that now you're perhaps opening up my view on this a little bit. I don't think I shared your view, but now when I think about all their interactions, it's always sort of almost out of an act of jealousy to be one of the boys.
Yeah.
As opposed to... Because we've all experienced that. When all the guys like a particular girl, you like her as well, because all the other guys do. And it would besmirch your name not to be considered one of them that likes her. You've got to. And there's still a group of naive boys. They're not real men. So perhaps you speak quite rightly about this. I think you've hit the nail on the head, perhaps.
Yeah, he's just going after Catherine because he wants to be part of the crowd. And I also suspect there's a bit of the knowledge that Jeanne will never go for any guy.
Yeah.
And so this is him trying to find a new lady, but it's a bit of denial in a way.
Well, she's now two peas in a pod with Lair. And if that he already like shows that is a close friends, father son, big brother, little sister kind of relationship, but she's put that as the peak of her relationships. He's already kind of identified that anyway. So you're right. Perhaps he realizes at this stage she's not.
There's not going to be a lover.
No, and so perhaps he's accepting his place and then joining the boys in a childish fantasy. But then he's writing. But this is all about the poem he writes that he then doesn't recite. But what makes a man write poetry better than a woman? You know,
Well,
and we'll try and guide. Like men don't, I don't think naturally go out and write poetry. I always say, men don't cry at films. Okay,
no.
now that doesn't mean you won't see a man cry during a film, but I rarely see a man crying at a film. He's crying about something else, and the film is unlocking what he's crying about. But men don't tend to cry at films. So if a man does, because I've cried at maybe 2 or 3 films ever, and each time I've never cried about the film in itself. And we tend to guise our emotions by thinking of something else. So war poetry. I think war poetry is actually about a woman, always. Some love that they hold, and they're using war as the excuse to write romantically. You've got to romanticize something, and all I've got around me is war, but truly I'm thinking about some girl back at home.
Not
And
every poet is as honest as, say, Tolkien, who
yeah,
was writing an epic poem of the Lay of Leithian about his wife. And he was very open about it.
yes.
Not everyone is capable of that.
I think, yeah, I think most people, it mans up poetry by writing about war, you know? And so his poem in here, I don't think it's necessarily him going, I'm in love with Catherine, but something sparked him to poetry. And
I think I was going to say there's another factor. He doesn't read his own poem.
no,
Why doesn't he read it to Catherine? Is it because he must read it to Catherine? And here's the thing. Louis has never shown himself previously to be that much of a cowardly individual.
no,
Or, like, if he feels something strongly, he goes for it.
yeah,
We know he's a strong character, and we know he clings to Jeanne, and he's upfront and honest. But there's some things he's keeping to himself about some things regarding, for example, he talks a lot with Noelle. He doesn't tell Jeanne about these chats. But not everything, because, the boys have to always cling together, the lads, as the English would put it. But I think that's how you guys would describe it. But the thing is, I think he actually composed a poem about, he's lying to us. I think he composed a poem maybe to his fantasy of Catherine, yes, but also to Jeanne.
oh, most definitely.
And because La Pucelle d'Orléans, La Rose d'Orléans,
Yeah,
like, it's almost the same thing. But and the reason I say that is, like, you could replace La Pucelle, the messenger, or the Christos with Rose. It's very similar in a way psychologically, at least for us men. And I think that if he were to recite the poem himself, his gaze would no matter what, turn to the one he's really speaking to. As when men want to talk to someone, they'll always look at that person. We're a little too direct and obvious at times, at least in my experience. And the problem is he knows himself. Louis is a very smart man. He's very clever in a way not even Noelle and Paladin are. And so I think he knows what he'll do. And so he gives it to Noelle, who is in love with Catherine. But here's another problem. He is also giving Noelle the upper hand in getting Catherine. If he was
because of the paladin. Because of the paladin.
Exactly. But if he was in love with Catherine, why would he give Noelle a shot with Catherine? Wouldn't he want that shot himself? So why is he giving it the chance to seduce her to someone else?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Because he doesn't truly want it. Because if he truly wanted it, he would use we use the weapons at our disposal. So
Yep.
Paladin is using his boastful nature, his ability to spin a story, and she's laughing away and loving every moment of it. And we all use the weapons to our disposal. And there's
another factor. Louis is a noble, or noble. She's a noble.
Yeah.
He could also use that. He's literate. He writes great poetry. He can probably recite it half as well as Noelle, and he's a noble.
Yeah.
But he's not even going to go for it?
Yeah. What's holding him back? What's holding him back? It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think you've really got to the core of this chapter. I like it.
Yeah, but I think it makes it even more tragic because no matter what, he is in on reciprocated love.
Mm. Yeah.
And so, in some ways, Louis is one of the most tragic characters of this novel.
He's the hand that's clapping on its own.
Yeah.
You know? Vigorously. But to nothing. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with this chapter. Chapter 16, Finding of the Dwarf.
Oh,
sorry.
Comment. What I like about Kathleen is, she lives for Paladin's stories and for the poem that Noel recites to her. And that's very Celtic. The Celts live for poetry and song and stories. And the French, it must never be forgotten, are part Celtic.
Yeah, of course. We address this. If you want to address the history, then there's quite a lot of history pre this. Yeah. Go through Joseph's video casts, and you will see we spent quite some time going through the history before this book. That was a long time ago now, Joseph. It's got to be 6 months ago. Maybe more. Yeah. Okay, so chapter 16, The Finding of the Dwarf.
Oh, I love the dwarf.
Yeah.
Linné. Now, the French have a history of calling really tall guys shorty, historically. Yeah. Pépin de Bref. Charlemagne's dad may have been about 6 feet tall. And he was called Bref, or tiny. So
an ironic name.
And it's also a comment on his reign, which was 26 years, which is a long time to reign for. And yet it's called the very brief reign. So there's that French humor.
There's that French saying. They do lots of things like this, just in general speech. So, like, if you want to say the bill in French, it's l'addition s'il vous plaît. But you can also say le douloureux s'il vous plaît, which means the painful one.
Yeah, the double words.
And so it's not really painful, but it's a way of saying le douloureux. It's such a off the cuff thing they say. And it's the French have those little ways of talking about things. And the dwarf is such a good nickname for him because he's this beast of a man.
He's like, obviously has 6'6" or something?
Yeah, he has a heart of gold. A heart of gold. But equally he's a maniac. And as again, this is character building for Joan, which we've already seen repeatedly. But everyone else just sees him as, let's put him to death. He's a traitor. She gets to the core of who he is as a character. She works him out by just having a conversation with him and seeing if he's truly loyal to France. And the book highlights to him she was France.
Which she was to all French.
Yeah. Well, so then he's loyal. Whereas they couldn't see that as a group. She sliced him open with her words and simple kindness and made him essentially as close to her right-hand man as he could be after the Paladin.
And what's more is, I find his story this is the most gut-wrenching story in the book to an extent of, in terms of backstory for the characters.
Yeah.
My mother, now his words, my mother died, then my 3 little children, one after the other, all in 2 years. Now, I will say, once I've said it before, but no parent, no matter the time period, should ever bury their child.
No, yeah.
It was the famine. Others fared so. It was God's will. And then he goes on to eventually explain that, then when my poor wife's fate was come, I begged for leave to go to her, she who was so dear to me, she who was all I had. I begged on my knees, but they would not let me. Could I let her die friendless and alone? Could I let her die believing I would not come? Would she let me die and she not come? And so we get the knowledge that he had one of the most beautiful love stories in the story. They buried 3 kids together, and he never relented on his love for her. And this also shows something about Mark Twain. He was at his core a romantic.
Yes.
Because we do know that when he buried his kids, he still, much as he needed a lot of help because he was old and emotionally broken, he still went out of his way to try to care for his wife, who was in some ways more broken. But there's another miracle here that Jeanne does. This is her Lazarus. She revives him from the dead psychologically. Now, Lazarus in the Bible, dans la Bible, is revived from the dead. Jésus. And she kind of revives this guy who's in his spirit dead. He's no longer amongst the living, and she revives him. So I think that's what this story reminds me of, in that it's a mirror image in a way. And Twain is commenting not on a physical death, but on a psychological and spiritual one. And she restores him to life, in some ways, in the most important of ways, and healing some of his wounds. And I like how he says, there was nothing left to love, referring to after his wife died. Ah, yes, there was. France. The children of France have always their mother. And this is really a French mindset. Every French person around the world I've seen and talked to has our real mother is France. Our mothers, our actual mothers may shun us, or we may break with them, but we can never break with France. She is our real mother, in a way. They cannot be left with nothing to love. You shall live, and you shall serve France. I will serve you. You shall fight for France. I will fight for you, is what he tells her. You shall be France's soldier. I will be your soldier. You shall give all your heart to France. And he keeps telling her, I will give all my heart to you. And she's touched and pleased, but she's still insistent on France coming before her. And Lene is just insisting on her to an extent. But he also, now, he ends up later proving to be her finest warrior alongside Le Paladin.
Yes.
And I have to mention, as much as we take, I think the English saying is the piss out of Paladin, he is truly a remarkable fighter. And he's a bit like and this might be a weird comparison, but like, I think it's a Great Bernard, my brother once said, who are pretty cowardly dogs. But if you put a child in their care and put the child in danger, you'll see them transform into a great protector and the bravest of dogs. And I think that's the case with Paladin.
Yeah.
Jeanne, he is the most cowardly of men. But you put Jeanne in the same room, he is suddenly, or even Catherine to an extent, because he's obviously in love with Catherine. I think you find truly a Paladin. And he becomes as brave as as your Englishman William Marshall or Robin Hood.
Well, I think what you're seeing as well is he's a character who you see this in sports a lot, and if you know anything about sport, and I'm going to talk English soccer here, football. The most famous, the most famous manager was Sir Alex Ferguson, a Scot. How could he not be with the surname Ferguson? But he talked about a particular player that he had playing for him, which was Ji-sung Park. And he used to say about Ji-sung Park is a big game player. That's when he comes to his fore. You know, he can go hiding in the games that aren't so important. But in the big games, in the finals, Ji-sung Park is our man. And it was true. He always used to step up in the big games. It's like there are certain players that just, I don't know, there are certain...
They rise to the occasion.
They rise to the occasion. And if the occasion's not big, or they don't have that certain inspiration, they can't lift themselves to the moment. And then the moment's there and they suddenly step up and they go the extra notch. And I think that's true of the Paladin. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and
it is a great story as well for the dwarf. I think it's a great backstory.
I love his
Go, just make sure you tune into that chapter. It's a beaut.
Yeah, it is. Chapter 18, just to skip a little ahead, because
sweet bit of truth is not. There's not much going on there.
Chapter 17 just sees Louis mocked for having been afraid, and he easily confesses yes, and he just says, "Yeah, I was afraid."
He says it was fear, and thank you for the honest idea too.
But that said, the interesting thing is that Jeanne ends up predicting the next battle. And, well, no, yeah, I got myself mixed up once again. But, well, she does predict it, but then the battle goes to take place and she takes off and is crying out for her horse, a horse, which I think Twain there is kind of, we're supposed to compare her to Richard III in a way, where Richard III is an unworthy king and not a true hero and goes, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Jeanne cries out, a horse. And, you know, a dozen saddles are soon at her disposal in a moment. And that's, I think, Twain poking a little fun at Richard III, the play. And that's what that little paragraph reminds me of. And what I love is how Orléans goes nuts. And just, you know, they just completely lose it. And you have the garrison that rushes out there. And they just go mad. And I love it.
Yeah.
I find that though this next battle scene is vague compared to, let's say, Robert E. Howard's writing, because Howard is probably the greatest writer of battle scenes, I would say, almost in history, with his Conan, Hour of the Dragon, where he describes battles so well, and you truly get a sense of every sword stroke, and you almost feel the steel rendering through the man's flesh. Twain is a little more vague, but at the same time detailed, but there's a patriotism, a masculine ardor, I think that'd be the term, l'ardeur masculine, of, you get a sense of just, if your blood doesn't burn and get pumped with these scenes, I don't know what could possibly inflame your soul. I love these scenes, and I love how she's running around, she's urging her men forward, and she also scolds, of course, Dunois, and tells him, will you always play with these English? Now verily I tell you, we will not budge until this place is ours. We will carry it by storm. Sound the chart. My general, waste no more time, man. Let the bungles sound the assault. And I'm sorry, I really love this chapter, and it's I don't know how to describe it. This is Twain no longer writing in the comedic ways that he does in a lot of stories, but truly in the most dramatic, almost Shakespearean of just, this scene is very Shakespearean, I find. And I like that the La Famille de Boucher quickly welcome her back and are deathly relieved to see her safe and sound.
Yes.
And the funny thing is, against all hope or probability. So they thought she was going off to die. They're fearful for her, which is pretty touching. And yet she doesn't have any doubt. And now for me, reading this chapter as a kid, I remember being a child of, I think, 7 years old, and I was swept up into the clouds. It was one of the great moments of my childhood there.
Interesting. Just a couple of small points I picked up in this chapter. Firstly, you see those still have those low expectations, which you just brought out. We also see this line here where they say, as to that, how can any tell? They wear the livery of God. And even if one of these wears it rightfully, surely it were better than all the guilty should escape than we have upon our hands the blood of that innocent man. And I've heard this said frequently, and I've written it down on the side of my book. It says, it's better for 100 guilty men to live. It's better for 100 guilty men to live than one innocent die. And it's the reasoning I've heard against the death penalty is that if the death penalty kills even one innocent man, was it worth it?
No.
Right. I'm not commenting, by the way. If you're pro or anti the death penalty, I'm just saying a phrase I've heard. But we see Jeanne echoing, or not echoing. That's not a word. Initiating was what the word I had in my head. Initiating this thought with her words, you know. And I quite like that thought. Also, I think this chapter I've got written down. We're seeing in this chapter, just by the way the Comte writes, that there's a little bit of the paladin in him as well. There's something like the paladin is an arse. He's talented, but he writes quite. You spoke about it a minute ago in the previous chapter. We see the talent of the paladin in this battle, and you see him write about paladin at his best, and I think the reason being is because he sees himself in the paladin a little, and I think that comes out in this chapter. And I'm trying to find where I've put it. I underlined something which showed that to me, and I can't remember where.
I'm trying to find it. Here we are.
Not really.
We work out after Jeanne in a body, the paladin in the lead with the banner. And that's not the only part, but there's others where it explains that the paladin is often...
he forgot
to respect the paladin now.
He forgot what fear was, and he never laid about him in his imaginary battles in a more tremendous way that he did in this real one. And wherever he struck, there was an enemy the less. And so we're seeing the paladin at his best. But there's somewhere in this I wrote, we see the Comte sees himself in the paladin. And maybe I'll have to bring it back out at another point. But I felt like he was really resonating with the character that's maybe his opposite. Maybe his opposite. And I really liked that. Should we crack on to 19? Because we've been going for like half hour or so.
Yeah.
Chapter 19, we burst in upon ghosts. I feel like this is that chapter. You know the chapter in Star Wars. Yeah, sorry, brain went dead for a second then, and almost said Star Trek. You know in Star Wars where Luke is with Yoda and he goes into the cave, and it's a kind of odd moment in the film, and I feel like that's what this is. It's the same thing.
Now, the funny thing is, in the novelization of episode 5, the novel actually makes the scene make sense. The scene is one of the most important in the entire story.
Right.
But in the movie, it's completely out of place. And this is the problem of the novel, which came out a year before the movie. And the screen, there's a difference between them. The novel is able to expand and explain, and it was very clear and it made some sense. But in the movie, they didn't quite translate that. And the novel was a mixture of George's script, his notes, and another writer throwing more of his own stuff in as well. And you get a very, very strong novel, very well-written one. But you can't quite translate everything to the film, just the screen. So on that note, I highly recommend people pick up the episode 4, 5, and 6 novels because they're quite good.
I've read them myself, but most people have just
seen the movie.
Yeah,
the novels are better.
But there is something in here that I think is really important. In the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, the longer we sat so, the more deadly still that stillness got to be. And when the wind began to moan around the house presently, it made me sick and miserable, and I wished I had been brave enough to be a coward. And I feel like that harkens back to the previous chapter, chapter 17, where he admits his fear. Because they go, I came out and said it was fear. So there he was brave enough to admit he was a coward when they were jesting at his expense. But he was not brave enough to admit he was a coward in this moment over potential ghosts. And I just thought that's the Comte as well. Like, because let's pretend the Comte is a real character. Mark Twain is not. It's being written by the Comte. Mark Twain is writing through his own eyes, but as the Comte. And we're now perceiving that the fallible nature of humanity that he's putting in. So I think Mark Twain is projecting something out about his own character in this moment. He's brave enough to admit some fears, but not all the fears, because some fears, I don't like to admit them. And we know that's true. There's certain things we're scared of and we're happy to say, I'm scared of that. And there's others we go, I am never telling anyone about that fear.
It's only when you're faced with that fear that you shrivel and you break like a twig.
Yeah.
And we've all seen and experienced it. And it's not a pleasant feeling when you're faced with your own incredible pathetic weakness that reduces you to nothing. It's not a pleasant feeling. We've all had those moments of utter failure and fear. But it is the most remarkable of men who can rise above it when eventually confronted with it and conquer it. A few men, I think, have been able to do that.
Yes.
And it is something, I would argue, very beautiful when they do. And like, on the other hand, I've seen some men describe themselves as cowards historically when they were nothing of the sort. I'm going to once again harken back to Tolkien. He once said he himself, I wasn't a brave man in my youth. But we know from, well, at least I studied a bit of his World War I career. He was courageous.
Really?
He was quite brave. He was only sent back to England because he felt deathly sick. He was incredibly brave. And yet he believes he was a coward because he ended up returned to England and didn't go back to the field.
Interesting.
So, and he never succeeded in going back to the battlefield. But like looking at the historic record, he was quite the brave man.
That it's funny because that puts some weight behind how he writes the when you look at Aragorn, the way he writes Aragorn is the ever professional brave man. Every aspect of him is a brave man. And then you've got Gimli the dwarf, who is also
just chivalrous.
Yeah, brave to the end, and yet there's doubts about him and his bravery because he's small, but he's not. And then you think about name of the elf, brain gone dead. Legolas again, brave. What you just said there changes your view on how he's writing these. He's projecting out his ideals of bravery. Interesting, very interesting. Right, let's press on. Sorry, because we're now at 40 odd minutes. Let's do the final chapter, 20. Joe makes cowards brave victors, which ties us in neatly. I felt with this chapter, we were again peeling back because pretty soon you don't need. We're now almost halfway through the book. You don't need to peel back any more layers of Joan's character. You anticipate who and what she is by nature. This is, I feel like, at the last point we're starting to peel away the layers just to fulfill us as the reader's need for confidence in her. You know? We've already established it. Every time you read a situation in this book, you know she knows it all, she's got it all, she's powerful. But even as a reader, we're supposed to have some fragment of doubt. When's she going to trip up? When's she going to make a mistake? This is instilling in us. No, she is France. She is France. She's the bravest of France. And they do that with the way her and Laia work together. I think it's a very, very good chapter.
And what's interesting is, to refer to Scotland's finest writer, in my opinion, Nigel Tranter kind of revives some of these ideas in this story and in this chapter in the Bruce novel, where some of the characters look at Robert the Bruce not as simply the Bruce, but as he is Scotland. And, like, if he lives, Scotland lives. If he dies, Scotland dies.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I would argue that there's always that one figure in history who embodies everything about a nation. Rome had Augustus Caesar, or Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, I would also argue. France has Jeanne d'Arc, Scotland has Robert the Bruce. I would argue England had probably the Duke of Wellington. And here you see Jeanne just as La France. She's just La France éternelle. It's just the eternal France. And I just love how she just sweeps away, as he puts it, as Twain puts it. After all these humiliating years, France was going to take the offensive. That France, so used to retreating, was going to advance. That France, so long accustomed to skulking, was going to face about and strike. The joy of the people passed all bounds.
Yeah.
The city walls were black with them to see. The army march out in the morning in that strange new position, its front, not its tail, toward an English camp. And now I actually think that part of that paragraph, I'm pretty sure I read that part of that really takes me back to a bit of Lord of the Rings, actually. I think Tolkien reused part of this paragraph. Or maybe, wrote his own variant to it. Anyways, he definitely read this book. But, sorry, that's a weird thought. But that said, I love how Twain interweaves here the actual facts, where at the time, in the 100 Years' War, France was used to retreat. It was only the Scots who could win France victories by this time. Ever since Bertrand du Guesclin had passed, France had not had a victory, or to call her own. It was only the Scots who could win her victories. And while these were great victories, heck, you pretty much had the heir to a crown that was killed, Henry V's heir, his younger brother. I believe it was Clarence, who was slain. That was a great victory. But it only enraged Henry. It only enraged him and enraged England. It did not actually win anything, really, to an extent. Especially when the king and his noblemen threw away John Stuart, their great general. They threw him away to die because they were jealous of his victory. So they took their own victory and threw it into the mud. But here, Twain is commenting that, Jeanne has turned it around. And this is just, I really like the victory, but I find that there's a hint of the shadow that's to come.
Yes. I agree with you. I think what you're seeing here is Joan at her best. She's a troop rallying, decisive, brave
heroine.
Yes, and La Hire responds to it immediately. That's the music I like to hear. Let's do it. Let's go get a victory. Come on. And Dunois is ever the sort of backpedaling. Dunois is not a character you like.
No, he's essentially one of the Pharisees.
Yes, he is. He's a bad voice in the ear. He's a naysayer. He's a no man. You don't want yes men everywhere, and you don't want no men everywhere. But he's always a no man. No, let's not do that. Let's take a break. Let's think about it. No, action. And from Joan's standpoint, she's already been held up. She wanted to get to this battle months earlier. The only thing that held her up was the cardinals, the priests, the king, the French were the only thing that stood between her. She'd been told long in advance by her voices, let's get going. So
And I've lived with people like Dunois, and it's not.
it's not healthy.
No, it's very toxic, and it destroys your spirit. It breaks, and you do not listen to them.
No, indeed.
Right? Because they never have anything good to say to you. They never have any good intention for you, and they are, in a way, I would say, to an extent, a darkness.
Actually, the fact that she keeps him about is also, I think, in some ways telling, because it's her saying, it's you don't know light without dark, you don't know dark without light, and so him being there provides a tool by which she can sharpen herself. Lahir is always going to be pushing her forward, but he's.
But and he has that great line.
Go on.
I my patron. Yeah. That is the music I love to hear. Yes, that is the right tune and the beautiful words of my Jeanne Loud. We will carry them by storm. I just love how.
Yeah.
He's very Francais, I would say.
Yeah.
Charge. Let's just throw ourselves in the bow. Who cares?
So. So for me, it's an ideal chapter to finish on. It was your suggestion, I believe, when we were on the phone a few days ago. But I think you were absolutely right. It's an ideal chapter for us now to call it quits there. So as a reminder, you can. Oh, go on. One last point.
I was just going to say, now that I think about it, something about Lahil saying this is the music I like to hear.
Yeah. And
even Jeanne's letter earlier, saying, I would rather not fight you, but if you push it, we will have war.
Yeah.
Reminds me of something Charles de Gaulle once said, and he was asked, how do you intend to pursue France's interests after the Second World War? And he said, avec la guerre, with war if need be. And this frightened the Americans at the time, who didn't want any NATO members squabbling. And the thing is, Charles de Gaulle always had the mentality, NATO comes second before France.
NATO didn't come around till the 1970s, so I don't think it was NATO.
Or at least the concept of it.
Yeah,
American interests, will you compromise our interests? And he's like, how far do you plan to push this? I forget which it was. And he said, if I have to go to war, I will.
Yeah.
And that just had that frightened the Americans at the time and the ambassador from America, because we just got out of a really, really bloody war.
Yeah. Do we want to start more?
And Charles de Gaulle was the only, I would argue, the only great, large figure, leader who came out of World War II and said, we can have another one. I don't care. And, I don't blame some people for being a little nervous at that point because, but the difference is de Gaulle had fought on the front lines and like Churchill had, and he had no fear. He knew what war was. And he knew the capacity, his enemy's skills and abilities to keep up with France at the time, and he knew France's skills and ability to inflict pain on his enemies. So, but I think that here, there's something, and even in Jeanne with her letter, it just reminded me of Charles de Gaulle in a way. And contrary to the French are all cowards, or they're good at nothing but losing in war, there's a exuberance and over-eagerness sometimes amongst the French for
blood.
Yeah. And this is something...
Yeah, but I think that's true. I think the French love blood, they don't love war.
No.
I think they love blood, they don't love war.
The execution took place in France, 1939.
Yeah, they love victory.
Yes.
They love victory, and blood signifies victory.
And they love Napoleon, but they're annoyed with how things ended with him.
Yeah.
That's why they love Charles de Gaulle to this day. He never lost.
No, indeed.
They
love the French love victory. They love victory. I mean, yeah. To go back to sport, they just lost a World Cup. You don't hear about it at all now. But when they won it a few years ago, it's all you could hear about. Not another word could be heard. Right. We're now at 50 odd minutes. We've got to wrap this up. Come on.
Okay. All I was going to finish with saying was those of us who are French in North America are the exact same way. When Quebec wins at something, we brag about it when bande dessinée outsells manga, like it
Yeah.
did a little while ago. I forget what year, but I saw a video of it online, and you just had a lot of French YouTubers just going woo and
Yeah.
take that and whatnot, and you just had so many people salty and annoyed and just going. And even I wouldn't shut up about it because it's like bande dessinée de Quebec in France outsold manga, and you have the Japanese who just went happens. But
Yeah.
you had the French
Who
who turned around
cares?
like,
Who cares? But you French-based people, right, guys? That's the end of this segment because it's like 50 or nearly an hour on 4,
yep.
5, 6 chapters. Okay, so we hope you enjoyed our little review on it. We're going to come back to it again soon, hopefully. Schedules are not always easy to fit because obviously I'm in England and you are in the old Canadians. So listen into the reading if you want on My Story Fire, Vino Fire. You can listen in if you want to catch up with where we've been. Follow Canadian Culture Corner or the Brothers Crin.
Yep, that's perfect pronunciation of it.
On Storyfire, on YouTube, and across all his socials. And have a lovely afternoon or day.
And don't forget to smash the like and subscribe here and at Vino Fire or Your Story Fire book reading of Jeanne d'Arc because it's truly a great audiobook.
You're really kind. Thank you, Canadian Culture Joseph. Okay, guys, see you soon. Have a good one.